Everywhere you look, culture is full of characters who've been hanging around for decades. Mario is 44 years old, Garfield is 49, the Smurfs are 67, Wednesday Addams is 81, Superman is 87. But there's one character who's older than all of them, older even than Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh. It's this guy here. You probably don't recognize him, but he's the title character of one of the strangest and the most important comic strips of all time. A comic strip that against all odds is still running in 2025, over 100 years after it started. Our story begins in 1919. Woodrow Wilson is president. Babe Ruth is still playing for the Boston Red Sox. Thousands of Civil War veterans are still alive. Many of those Civil War veterans would have been reading newspapers, and if they turned to the sports page on June 17th, they might have come across a brand new comic strip. The star of that comic was Barney Google. His defining characteristic at first is an obsession with sports. We see him shirking his responsibilities as a husband and a father as he tries to sneak into the training camp of heavyweight boxer Jack Dempsey. Barney evolves quickly, shrinking notably in size. He also becomes very popular. He's sort of like a Prohibition-era Bart Simpson, complete with a hit novelty song.
Barney Google with a googly eye. Barney Google had a wife 3 times his size.
But in the preview of things to come, Barney is soon outshone by the introduction of an even more popular character, his racehorse Sparkplug. Sparkplug comes to dominate the narrative of the strip. From 1923 to 1926, Barney travels across America, entering Sparkplug in horse races. Joining them is the jockey Sunshine, who was unfortunately depicted in the racist style typical of 1920s comics. Barney becomes an everyman of the jazz age, in the words of comic historian Brian Walker. When he isn't racing his horse, he indulges in popular 1920s trends like flagpole sitting and casual anti-Chinese racism. In 1928, he runs for president as the Billy Goat candidate. Comic strips today are known for falling into predictable routines. Dennis the Menace annoys his neighbor. Garfield is lazy. But Barney Google in its early years makes wild narrative swings. Barney's wife, an important character in 1919, mostly vanishes after a few years. The strip spends months on stories where Barney switches places with a millionaire or becomes the target of a murder plot. In 1929, his appendix bursts, and the strip spends weeks with him in bed recovering. Things really take a turn, though, when the Great Depression hits. A strip that tapped into the zeitgeist of the 1920s seems to be a bit lost. A character named Ponyboy is introduced as a rival to Sparkplug. Another new character is Sully, a former sultan who becomes a wrestler. In 1934, the strip spends the first part of the year on a bizarre plot, where Barney tries to visit Miami but ends up getting kidnapped and involved in a revolution. After months of various hijinks, Barney ends up as the dictator of an island that seems to be partially modeled on Cuba. When Barney returns to the United States, the strip takes a fateful turn. Barney, still in his dictator's uniform, visits a lawyer's office where he learns he's inherited the piece of land in North Carolina. Barney arrives in the remote community of Hootin, Holler, which is full of what can only be described as hillbillies. After a few weeks of this, we get the first appearance of a character who will one day take over the strip, Snuffy Smith. At first, Snuffy is suspicious of this newcomer, but they soon become friends. Unlike Barney's previous adventures, his stay at Hootin Holler stretches on for years. When he does go back to the city, Snuffy comes with him. In 1938, the name of the comic changes from Barney Google to Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. Throughout the 1930s, Snuffy is a sidekick to Barney, but things start to change in the 1940s. In November of 1940, Snuffy enlists in the army, and the strip becomes focused on his life as a soldier. Weeks and then months go by without Barney making an appearance. When the U.S. enters the war, Barney joins the Navy. Then in 1942, cartoonist Billy DeBeck dies at the age of 52. His assistant Fred Laswell takes over the comic strip. Snuffy and Barney continue to serve in the military. Eventually, Snuffy ends up in Japan, where he terrorizes Tokyo. When the war ends, Snuffy and Barney return home to Hootin Holler. Barney's role in the comic begins to shrink, along with the size of his name in the title. Barney is suffering the same fate as Harold Hamgravy. Harold was once the star of the comic strip Thimble Theater. Then in 1929, he met a sailor named Popeye. Popeye was meant to be a minor character, but he proved very popular with readers. Within 2 years, Harold was gone. The strip was renamed for its new star. Like Popeye, Snuffy is now very much the star of the show. Laswell relates more to him. Barney's world of high living and horse racing isn't familiar to the cartoonist. Barney was always sort of an avatar for Debec, who was a larger-than-life character who was friends with Babe Ruth and Rube Goldberg. In 1954, Barney and Snuffy go on one last adventure together to Washington, D.C. After that, Barney leaves Hootin' Holler. For the next 43 years, he will make only occasional cameos in what had once been his comic strip. Laswell drops the continuing storylines that have been a feature of Debec's work. He fleshes out the cast of Hootin' Holler with new characters like Parson Tuttle, Doc Pritchard, and Miss Pernelli the schoolteacher. By the 1960s, the strip basically reaches its final form, one that would be recognizable to readers today. To create Hootin' Holler, Debec had done a lot of research into Appalachia. He had his hillbilly character speaking in what he believed to be an authentic dialect, one that many readers found hard to decipher. Laswell simplified the way the characters spoke, making them easier to understand. Under Laswell, the popularity of the strip soared. In 1946, it had been running in 206 newspapers. By 1960, it was running in 542. And by 1989, when it celebrated its 70th birthday, it was running in almost 900 papers. The early years of the strip had been defined by constant reinvention. Under Laswell, it settled into a comfortable formula. Hootin' Holler is a timeless place, largely cut off from the rest of the world. It can be tough to figure out what decade a Barney Google strip is from. Can you tell which of these comics is from 1965 and which is from 2001? Intrusions from the modern world are rare. Like this strip from 1985 where Snuffy encounters a boombox. In 2001, Fred Laswell dies at the age of 84, and the reins are passed to his assistant John Rose. Rose has continued the strip in the style of Laswell, though he's thrown in a few more references to the outside world. Barney Google, after being absent from the strip for 15 years, returns in 2012 as a regular recurring character, along with Sparkplug. And that's how we get to the present day, where you can pick up a newspaper and find a comic about hillbillies that's been running since 1919. Humor is obviously subjective, but after reading 1,000 or more strips from throughout Barney Google's 106-year run, I haven't really found any of them to be particularly funny. Still, I've developed an appreciation for this comic. I bought this book as part of my research, and it was a cool surprise to find an original Snuffy drawing by Fred Laswell inside. There are a lot of things I like about the comic. The art is beautiful, whether it's Debec's detailed packed panels or Laswell's confident line work. It's also a comic that was never afraid to be strange. Debec's strip is a world of secret societies and sinister plots. Laswell brought his own brand of weirdness to the strip. People losing their heads, a potion that gives everybody beards. Rose is clearly a student of the strip's long history, and seems to enjoy bringing back minor characters from decades past. Barney Google has had an impact far beyond the comics page. Debec coined or popularized a number of words and phrases, including horse feathers and heebie-jeebies.
Heebie-jeebies.
In a model copied by many comic strips that came afterward, Barney Google was widely merchandised with everything from toys to board games. There were a slew of movie adaptations, both in live action and animation, and later a cartoon on TV. Barney Google was one of the first comedic strips to feature ongoing storylines, paving the way for the likes of Peanuts and Bloom County. In researching this video, I came across a lot of obits from men nicknamed Barney Google or Snuffy. Charles Schulz, the creator of Peanuts, was nicknamed Sparky after Sparkplug. It's a good reminder of how massively popular the strip was at its peak, and how much it meant to people. It's kind of remarkable that the strip has run for 106 years with only 3 cartoonists. There's an unbroken line of succession from cartoonist to assistant. Things that could be described as comics have been around for hundreds of years. But the history of the modern American comic strip begins around 130 years ago with the creation of the Yellow Kid. Barney Google is a living link back to almost the very earliest days of the comic strip. You can name any random American strip, and there's a good chance it's appeared on the comics page alongside Barney Google. Crazy Cat, Blondie, Beetle Bailey, Garfield, Zitz. Barney Google began at a time when the idea of a 100-year-old strip would have been unthinkable. Comic strips back then were often short-lived. Even the famous Yellow Kid only lasted 3 years. In its early years, Barney Google was constantly evolving, like the still young medium of the comic strip. But as the years turned to decades, Barney Google settled into a familiar groove. That's not unusual for a comic strip. Look at this comics page from 1965. Some of the strips are still covering the same material 60 years later. Beetle getting beat up by Sarge, Dagwood being insulted by his boss. I find these super long-running comic strips fascinating. Bud and Jeff started in 1907 and lasted all the way to 1983. The Catch and Jammer Kids spanned 3 centuries, starting in 1897 and ending in 2006. By the end of their runs, these comics were relics of a mostly forgotten world. There's something deeply odd about 19th century German immigrant children still being around in the age of MySpace and flip phones. I think comic strips are sort of at the leading edge of super old pop culture. There are older characters from books, like Sherlock Holmes, but comic strips are unique. Some of them have been running continuously for 90 or 100 years. Just think of the weirdness created by a show like The Simpsons being on the air for 36 seasons, and then try to imagine another 70 seasons on top of that. Barney Google offers a preview of what can happen when a piece of IP just refuses to die. How many other characters will share the same fate, outliving the last person who remembers a world before they existed? Will the companies that own the rights to Snoopy or Sonic or Scooby-Doo ever let them fade away into oblivion? Barney Google has been around so long that he's actually in the public domain now. So there's nothing stopping you from slapping his face on a t-shirt or adding him into your own comic. Maybe you could team him up with Mickey Mouse and Popeye in some kind of public domain character shared universe. If you wait another 5 years, you could even add in Snuffy Smith. Though if history is any guide, the little hillbilly might just end up stealing the show.